Congress today did pass the all anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism resolution. This just happened today. So it was 311 members of the House voted yes, 14 voted no. Of those 14, there was one Republican who voted no. 13 Democrats voted no. The one lone Republican was Thomas Massie. I love Thomas Massie. He is probably my favorite member of Congress because he's so consistent. And he really does. He fights for the American people. He fights for what he thinks is right. And he doesn't seem to be bought off by anybody ever. Massie just kind of marches to the beat of his own drum. He pisses off Republicans. He pisses off Democrats. He pisses off everybody, and he seems to not care. So I love Thomas Massie, and I hope that his constituents continue to reelect him. If I lived in his district, I certainly would. But he was the only Republican to vote no on this, and 13 Democrats voted no. That was pretty much the entire squad plus some. Then you had a bunch of Democrats who voted present. So they didn't want to vote yes on this. They didn't want to say that all anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism, but they didn't want to say no to it either, probably because they've got a lot of money flowing in from various different pro-Israel organizations like AIPAC, amongst others, and they don't really want to upset them. But at the same time, their constituents are not happy. So they do this little I'm not going to say yes or no. I'm able to vote present. I don't think they should be allowed to vote present. You should have to be. Look, in Congress, it should either be yes or no. You should not be able to vote present, and you shouldn't be able to not vote. If you're a member of Congress, you should have to vote on everything. And these days, you can vote from sitting anywhere in the world. You should be able to vote. So there really is no excuse why a member of Congress can't vote unless they're in a coma. That would be the only reason. So I think some of the rules need to change, because what they do when they don't vote or when they vote present is they're just not wanting to have to have to answer to the American people who put them in office. And we're paying their salaries and we're paying their health care. The least they could do is show us where they stand on issues. So 92 Democrats withheld. I do want to play this clip for you. This is Representative Jerry Nadler, Democrat, saying it's ridiculous to call all anti-Zionism anti-Semitism. Watch this.
More problematically, the resolution suggests that all anti-Zionism, it states that all anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. That is either intellectually disingenuous or just factually wrong. And it unfairly implicates many of my Orthodox former constituents in Brooklyn, many of whose families rose from the ashes of the Holocaust. While most anti-Semitism is indeed anti-Semitic, the authors, if they were at all familiar with Jewish history and culture, should know about Jewish anti-Zionism that was and is expressly not anti-Semitic. This resolution ignores the fact that even today, certain Orthodox Hasidic Jewish communities, the Satmar in New York and others, as well as adherents of the pre-state Jewish labor movement, have held views that are at odds with the modern Zionist conception. According to the Jewish Encyclopedia, quote, the anti-Zionist worldview of the ultra-Orthodox groups, like the Satmar Hasidim, perceives Zionism and the establishment of the State of Israel as an anti-Messianic act. That is to say that these ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jews believe that only the Messiah can bring about the true Israel. And I assure you, the Satmar Hasidic Jews are certainly not anti-Semitic. I should also note that there are those who try to smear even progressive pro-Israel supporters with the inappropriate label of Israel hater or anti-Zionist. Under this resolution, those who love Israel deeply but criticize some of its policy approaches could be considered anti-Zionist. That could make every Democratic Jewish member of this body, because they all criticize the recent Israeli judicial reform package, de facto anti-Semites. Might that be the author's intention?
So Jerry Nadler, there he is saying, hey, anti-Zionism is not always anti-Semitic. So how can you possibly say that when there's a bunch of really Orthodox Jewish organizations and groups and just people who do not agree with Zionism? They believe that Zionism is against the religion of Judaism. Most Zionists are not religious at all, except for the Christian Zionists, who are very religious. And the reason why they support Zionism is because they believe that all the Jews need to gather in Jerusalem in order for there to be Armageddon, where they get slaughtered so that Jesus Christ can come back. That's what they believe. And so, not exactly the nicest, most happiest reason to believe that Jews should go back to. They believe in the gathering of Israel, of all the Jewish tribes returning to the land of Israel. But in the religion of Judaism, many of the really staunch scholars and those who really truly practice the religion say that Zionism is not part of the religion, that the only Zionism can be done with that only the Messiah could bring about the gathering, or that this gathering of Israel is more symbolic. It's not actually literal. So there's a lot of debate there. And so obviously being anti-Zionist is not always anti-Semitic. These two things are not at all even remotely the same. There's plenty of Zionists who aren't Jewish at all. They're Christians. And you could be completely against them and completely against what they believe and not even know a Jewish person in your entire life, have never been exposed to Judaism or Israel or any of that, but just live in a community with these really staunch Zionist Christians and be like, I don't believe that. I'm totally against that idea. That sounds like a crazy idea. Does that suddenly make you anti-Semitic? I mean, think about that in a bubble. If you were living in a world where you didn't know a single Jewish person, you don't know anything about Israel, all you know is you're surrounded by these Christians who are like, we want all the Jews to go back to this land, to Israel, because, and you're sitting there thinking, but aren't there people there? And wouldn't that kind of cause a problem? I don't think I like that idea. I think this is kind of a stupid idea. Does that make you anti-Semitic? If you're Jewish, are you now a self-hating Jew? This is always, the slurs that they throw in order to just delegitimize people's legitimate thoughts, their legitimate arguments. It's a way to just say, no, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it from you. We can't have this conversation. This is based on faith. It's based on feeling. It's not based on logic at all. And good for Jerry Nadler for calling that out. He himself is Jewish. In fact, it turns out he's the only member of Congress who has received a yeshiva education. So there he is saying, oh, come on, guys, this is ridiculous. You can't call some of my fellow constituents anti-Semitic when they themselves are very, very Jewish, and they are very much against Zionism. If things couldn't get worse, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. It always gets worse once you bring in Debbie Wasserman Schultz. Well, her and her friends in Congress are looking to launch a McCarthy-era-like commission to essentially snuff out anti-Semitism in the United States. It is akin to the McCarthy-era House Un-American Activities Committee. This is the new legislation that they are introducing. It is a bipartisan commission to study acts of anti-Semitism in the United States. And it's an act that legislation that they're actually putting forward. This is with Marionette Miller Meeks, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, Maria Elvira Salazar, Josh Gottheimer, Max Miller, and Jared Makowskowitz. They're introducing this legislation. They say the legislation that addresses the uptick of anti-Semitism in the United States establishes a commission to investigate the causes of anti-Semitism, evaluates the evidence and circumstances, and reports the findings and recommendations to the president and Congress. This bill would create a new congressional body with broad subpoena authority to force Americans to testify and produce evidence related to the commission's mission to investigate the facts and causes of anti-Semitism in the present day. So basically, they're going to be, you're going to see more of these, if this passes, which it probably will. You're going to see more of these images of people being carted in front of Debbie Wasserman Schultz while she sits there and grills them and says, so you're an anti-Semite and here's the evidence. You're against Zionism. And this is about Zionism and Israel and not about actual anti-Semitism because of the timing of this bill being introduced. So they didn't do this under the Donald Trump administration when people were screaming that the Nazis were back, the alt-right white supremacists were back from Charlottesville, and they're holding up swastikas. That is not when they introduced this legislation. They do it after October 7th, when people are saying we are against the idea of an ethno-national state that ethnically cleanses and genocides an entire group of people out of the region. We're against that. And so now they're saying, well, then we need a commission. We need to get a commission together, and we need to cart Americans in front of this commission I wouldn't be surprised if I got a phone call, I guess, to cart us up in front of Congress to say, you have been spreading anti-Semitism, haven't you? You're against Zionism. I watched your show and this is what you said. You're against Semitism. I've tried to do my best, Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She's too annoying. I can't actually mimic her well enough. So apparently this commission is going to make it to where in the legislation, a person is not able to waive their Fifth Amendment. They're not able to use their Fifth Amendment and to say, I don't want to implicate myself. They are going to force it. They would have the power to subpoena people. They would have the power to investigate people, and they would just have a lot of power within this commission to study acts of anti-Semitism in the United States. And you know what they specifically mean is people who are against Israel, the nation of Israel, which is a Middle Eastern country. You should be absolutely allowed as an American to be against whatever country you want. If you want to be against China, if you want to be against Iran, if you want to be against Russia, if you want to be against Ukraine, if you want to be against Mexico, you should be allowed to do that as an American. These are foreign countries. These are not American nations. But they're going to cart Americans in front of Congress to talk about why they don't support Israel. Make no mistake about it. That is exactly what this is about. And really, because their press release states it over and over and over again, it says in their press release, they constantly talk about October 7th over and over again, saying before October 7th, anti-Semitism was on a sharp rise. But now we've seen it skyrocket, especially online, said Waserman Schultz. This bipartisan bicameral inquiry, which is supported by Jewish civil society leaders and experts, will complement the implementation of President Biden's first ever national strategy to counter anti-Semitism and inform key policy decisions in combating this disturbing trend. So it's all about October 7th. It's all about Israel. It's all about those who are not okay with the IDF carpet bombing Gaza, killing thousands upon thousands of people. If you think that, you are an anti-Semite and Congress is coming after you. And the next thing you know, you're going to have Debbie Wasserman Schultz, you so-called journalists, talking about these things, reporting the crimes of the IDF. When you do that, you know you're an anti-Semite. So it's just heating up. It's getting worse. The problem with this is I don't see this not passing with the way Congress is, the way it's bought off by organizations like AIPAC, which is an Israeli lobby run by Americans, but the I in AIPAC is for Israel. It is not I wouldn't call it a pro-Jewish organization. There are pro-Jewish organizations, there are pro-Jewish lobby groups, but there is a distinction between pro-Jewish and pro-Israel. Pro-Israel is for a foreign country. Pro-Jewish is for people who are religiously or culturally Jewish living in the United States. That's fine. That's like an Asian American lobby group. There are Asian American lobby groups, but a pro-China one, think about that for 2 seconds. Okay, so there's a difference between having like a pro-Iranian American group that supports the rights and the concerns of Persian Americans, and then there's a pro-Iran organization that's completely different. So there is a separation between people and nation, and most Jews do not live in Israel. They're not connected to Israel. Israel says they are, but they don't have to actually personally agree with that or believe that. And so, we're just going to see things ramp up as Israel loses the narrative. And really, we're seeing this now. We're seeing this uptick in these types of these votes that they're putting forward in the House of anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz and friends coming out with this new, the Un-American, the House Un-American Activities Committee, basically. They're coming out with these things because Israel's losing the narrative. Social media has changed things. And the fact that Gazans and Palestinians in general have internet and they have cell phones and they're able to capture footage of what's actually happening to them. And that wasn't really done previously. So with the internet, with the fact that they at least have 3G wireless in Palestine, that's all they have is 3G. It's not great, but it's something. And it actually gets the videos out there. They might upload really slowly, but they do upload. And so people see what's going on with our own eyes, we're seeing what's happening on social media, and that is causing Israel to lose the narrative. When they sit there and say, "Oh, we've got all the evidence. This is what they're doing," and then they try to show us their evidence, and their evidence is not holding up to the standard of what normal, logical people would consider to be evidence, they lose. They lose. They've just lost the plot, and people are just like, "I don't think I agree with you." And yeah, I think what you're doing might be actually pretty bad. What happened to you was really bad, but what you're doing in response is 10 times worse, and that makes you the bad guy now. What happened to you? You were a victim, but not all victims are always victims. There, being a victim is a state. It's a phase in time, right? It's not your status for life. It's just something. At times you're a victim, and at times you could be the assailant. And that's what we're seeing with Israel. People were very much sympathetic to what happened to them on October 7th, but what they've turned around to do is so much worse. And the retaliation is so extreme that they have just lost people. People are not siding with Israel anymore. So that is why we're seeing this ramping up. And that's why we're going to see a bigger crackdown from members of Congress. We're going to see a crackdown. There's going to be a big push from those lobbies that are going to be lobbying members of Congress to use resources like the FBI, to use resources like congressional hearings, to weaponize and to support Israel, a foreign Middle Eastern country.